Hey everyone, a very warm welcome to everyone present in this live. Here is another informative session from the 30 Days of Web Development program, a program which will help you learn the basics of web and get you ready with your web development journey. Today we are having Sanjana with us, who will be sharing her knowledge on Bootstrap and will help you get ready with the Bootstrap concept and with the concept which are generally used in making Bootstrap projects. So over to you, Sanjana.
Thank you, Harsh. And hello, everyone. Welcome to 30 Days of Web Development's session on Bootstrap 101. Let me just share my screen real quick. Is my screen visible, Harsh?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, hi, everyone. Welcome once again. And before we get started, I'd like to wish all of you a happy New Year's. And I hope you're watching this video in good health. So, with that, let's get started. Um, so for those of you watching, if you're a little familiar with web development or web design of any kind, you've likely heard of Bootstrap. And in case you haven't, then Bootstrap is actually an incredible popular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript framework. So this is usually used for developing responsive websites and web applications. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sanjana Shivkumar, and I'm a third year CSE student at Reva University, Bangalore. I'm an aspiring full stack developer and currently a part of the core team as a cloud platform lead at Developer Student Clubs, Reva University. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and GitHub right here. So while the session is being conducted, please feel free to ask your questions on the live chat or on the Discord server, and I'll be able to answer them when I can. So Bootstrap actually is a front-end framework for UIs and themes. So it was created by a designer and a developer at Twitter in mid 2010, and it was released in fall of 2011. So it is also open source. So that means you can experiment around with it. It includes code in HTML, CSS, as well as JavaScript. So Bootstrap is used for building responsive mobile-first web applications. So what does mobile-first actually mean is that the code used can be viewed on any kind of screens that you are designing it for, not just limited to desktops or phones. So you start building it for phones and eventually move up to larger screens, which makes it a lot more easier to code. So you might have a question as why do we even use Bootstrap in the first place? So you can also use regular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but there's a few good reasons as to why it's good to know a little bit more about Bootstrap. Um, so first of all, it's the easy prototyping. So this equals an increased development speed. So this is the most important reason why Bootstrap is preferred and any type of front-end frameworks is preferred. So you can even use backend frameworks such as PHP and JavaScript. So when you use Bootstrap, you have access to a lot of pre-designed components. With the use of classes and utilities, most of your UI comes professionally designed. So you can just add them to your site as and when required. So secondly is a mobile first approach. Uh, so you can expect your websites and your web applications to look great on any screens since there's a lot of breakpoint classes used, and you can further customize it with media queries if needed. Thirdly, it's detailed documentation. This is another huge advantage. If you head to getbootstrap.com, you'll see that most of the components are well detailed, and all you have to do is really search for the component that you're trying to implement in your site and add that to your code. And since this is very beginner friendly and easy to use, it has an incredible community too, where you can ask questions, clear up your doubts, and even suggest additions to the further developments. And finally, it's incredibly responsive, as I forementioned in the mobile first approach that Bootstrap uses. This is a huge advantage since it does save time from creating custom media queries, and you can make sure that your site looks perfect without having to code everything from scratch. Here we also use the Bootstrap's grid system, which is incredibly easy to use once you understand it. And it can help you create beautiful websites and web applications that look good, regardless of the screen size you're designing it for. Also, Bootstrap is incredibly helpful if you were to participate in hackathons and if you were to try to develop a prototype of your website, and it saves you time and you don't have to worry about how you're going to implement each and every component. So here's a site that I came along with when I was looking up these details, and this is built using Bootstrap. As you can see, it looks incredibly professional and futuristic. And this is obviously one of the few inspirations that you can use when you are working with Bootstrap. Based on a survey conducted, you can see that nearly 52% prefer Bootstrap to other frameworks. And in conclusion, it is really advantageous to know a thing or two about it. And also, Bootstrap is not the only framework out there. You can also explore other frameworks like Material Design, Lateral Express. Again, it's all about the same type of code that's used. So once you get to know how to use one, you should be comfortable with one another. So let's talk about the differences between Bootstrap 3 and Bootstrap 4. The first significant change here is the grid system. So Bootstrap 4 now has a 5-tier grid system, which uses extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. So this helps make your sites even more responsive than what was possible before. And the CSS file used here was a major difference in the additions. So the CSS file used previously was less, which stands for leaner style sheets. And it's now overcome by SAS, which is syntactically awesome style sheets. And the reason why this switch was made is due to developers who better prefer SAS over less and other CSS libraries. So the CSS compiler used in Bootstrap 4 is libsass, which is used to compile the pages a lot faster. So I'm sure you must have gone through the documentation that was given in the sites on GitHub, and you must have been a little more familiar with Bootstrap than you were before. So you also have a lot of templates and themes that you can go through to understand how all of this works. So these are the Bootstrap components that are available in Bootstrap 4. These are not the only components, there's a lot more, but these are the major ones. So there's alerts, badges, all of these that you can come across when you go to getbootstrap.com. So you can, in case you want to include any of these in your websites or in your upcoming projects, you can go through how you can do that. Okay, now let's talk about downloading Bootstrap. So there's 4 different ways which you can do this. First, you can use a compiled CSS and JavaScript code. That means you'll be hosting your own Bootstrap and you'll be working on it. So the advantage that this has is that you can work on it offline. So you don't have to worry about the internet working when you're doing all this. So, but right now we're going to be using a Bootstrap CDN. So it'll be easier to work with your Bootstrap sites. And since you're using a CDN, your site's going to be hosted somewhere else. And it'll be easier instead of bloating your files. Also, if you were using any kind of framework such as React, Vue, or Angular, then you can use package managers such as NPM and Yarn to download Bootstrap for your applications. So with that in mind, let's get started. I've designed a little simple website over here. This is not much, just a very minimalistic portfolio website. But this has most of the components that you will be learning when it comes to Bootstrap. So we're going to try and design this website today. So I'll start from scratch so that, and please feel free to stop me at any point. So as you can see, there's a navigation bar up top here, and you have a little container with some normal details. So this container will help me explain you better what the grid system actually looks like. And for the experience container, we have a little picture here. So you can also use carousels in your websites. And we have a little form here Again, this is only to help you understand Bootstrap better. So this was my code when it came to using Bootstrap, and I'll show you how you can get started with this. So the first thing you have to do is go to getbootstrap.com. And since we're using the version 4, you have to go to this version. You're also welcome to use version 5 in case you're comfortable with it. There's only a few major changes that happen, but they're more or less the same working. So once you head on over here, you can see that there's different ways how you can download and use Bootstrap. Since we're going to use a CDN, we're going to use a starter template that's right here. So what you can do is copy the starter template. Again, this is the site. Yeah. So you can copy the starter template and create a .html file and paste it. So what this does is basically it includes the Bootstrap CDN here, and it includes jQuery down at the bottom here. And in case you're using a style sheet or something, it has to be included after this link. So make sure you don't include it before. And it's the same with the script tags. You can include it in the header instead of the footer of the code that you're using, but this has to be included first before any other files that you're including. So as it is, if I were to share this file right now, this is what a normal Bootstrap page would look like. If you were to not use Bootstrap, you would see that there would be a little difference when you were just printing hello world. So first, since we're trying to design this website, I'll show you how to design the nav bar. Okay, so I can go ahead and remove these comments and this right here. The first thing that you need to know about Bootstrap is that there's two types of containers, and the containers used here are a dot container class and a dot container fluid class. So these are basic layout elements. So you'll be using them a lot more here. And dot container basically is used to take the full width of the screen. And container fluid takes only the center of the screen. So I'll show you the difference when we're working on it. So to include a navigation component, you just have to use the class, the tag nav. And since Bootstrap is a CSS framework, so in order to use these components, you have to use the appropriate class associated with it. So in case of navbar, the class used here is navbar. And here we're going to use a darker navbar. So we're going to, just so it looks better. So you're going to use navbar dark and background as dark too. So if I were to show you how this looks, you can see that there's a little black navbar up top, but it's little because we haven't included anything in it yet. But this is how it's supposed to look like. Okay. And now let's say you want to include a brand name, or like I showed you in the website before this, just something on the upper left corner. So that's actually called a brand name itself. So the class used here is navbar brand. So let's just say if I would put hello, you can see that it's shown right here. Again, you can change this the color internally, externally using CSS. Again, if you don't want to do this, if you don't want to go through like typing the code yourself, all you have to do is to go to Bootstrap and you can search for navbar here. So here you can see that the code is already included. Like all you have to do is copy and paste it. But I'm going to go through them one by one just so you know that which kind of class is used for what. So if you're looking at this example right here, you can see that it's very responsive. When the screen size falls below a certain limit, you see that there's a toggle bar here. So that's what we're trying to do with our site too. So the code for this is this button navbar toggler. Again, you can copy it or you can type it manually, but they have to be included in the navbar. So make sure you're like keeping an eye on your tags and the opening and closing tags. So here I'm trying to integrate the responsive toggler. So this is a type button, just like the type that you use in forms. And here the toggle that we're using is collapse. And now we're going to use a span tag here to include the icon that's used. Bootstrap does not have its own icon, so in case you want to use icons, you'll have to head to other sites that offer icons, such as Font Awesome, Iconic, and Octicons. So there's a lot of options that you can go through here, but Bootstrap does not have its own icons. So as you can see, we have the icon here that toggles only when it falls below. Oh, I haven't made it responsive yet. Again, this is just basically HTML and CSS that you have learned in the previous sessions. Here, the only thing different is that we're applying a few classes that's built in into Bootstrap. Okay. Oh, okay. We're supposed to include the links that's supposed to drop down when we click this. So here, there's few links that you can add. There's also a drop-down option, and in case you want to search for something, you can do that too. So let me just show you how this would look as is. Okay, so this seems like a lot of code right now. So when we go here and we click on this, you see that we have the exact same components here. So since we're trying to make it look like this website right here, so we've made this as a collapsible toggle menu. So here we have an about, skills, experience, and a contact me section. So let me show you that. So once we have this button that we've coded right here, so we're gonna start with a div. Let me just make this bigger. So we have a div here that will include the components that we want to include when this is clicked on. So we'll make a list of those components. So we'll use a UL tag here. Class here is nav.nav. So we'll have the first list here. So this is an item that we're including in the list. So that's the class used as nav item. And bflex is a class that is included in Bootstrap 4, and this means direction as flex. So that's the class used here. And we want these lists to be in the center unless otherwise specified. So now that we have this list here, we have to include the name. So we'll use an A tag for this. And since it's going to be a link that is going to lead us to some part in the website itself, we're going to use the nav link class. And we can add the href later. Let's just name this as about. Yeah. Let's just add the rest of them. Okay. So let's make sure we've done this right. So we've added a toggler button, and the data toggle is collapse, and target is this. And class. Now per toggler, I can pull right. Yeah. There's actually an ID that we're supposed to add. But there's NAPA supported content. And this ID is to help Bootstrap know that this is what you're trying to accomplish. All right. There's something missing. So I think I've missed a class somewhere, which is why it's so important to know what these classes exactly work like. So in case you're getting confused right here, not to worry, I've just used the same code that you can find over here. The only extra I've added is the deflex and the justify content center classes to make sure that these look a little bit better. Okay. So now let's change the color of this hello right here. So again, if you're going to use an external CSS sheet, make sure you link it after the Bootstrap sheet itself. So I will use, I'm going to use sample.css here. Use the relative, you can use the relative files name. Okay. So since we want to change the name of this word right here, let's just include a class for this. Let's just say nav.brand. brand. Let's just say we want the color to be white. Okay. So of course I'm facing something right now. Let's just inspect these elements and see what it works like. As you can see that the sample.css is getting overwritten. So we'll look into this later. For now, let's just design the overall components. Okay, so now that we're done with the navbar, somewhat, so let's add a container here that contains the name. So let's make a comment here. So let me show you how these containers actually work. So we have a container here. Let's name this as container 1. And let's just have a little text here that says hello. So let's just say this background color as maybe red. And let's say the height could be maybe 500 pixels, just to show you how this looks. So let's say we're going to use the class here as container. So as you can see here, container is basically half the width right here. And if I were to use container fluid, it's the full width of the browser. Okay. So now let's make it look like the website previously. So now let's make this black. And the height can be completely up to you. Here you can use any kind of typography. In BootStrap, there's different types of typography that you can go through. Obviously, the first few ones being H1 to H6. Those are supported here, and they can also be used as classes in case you don't want to use the tags themselves. And there's also different types of customized headings. You can use display 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, take your time to go through all this. So here I'm going to use an H1 that says hello there. Let's make this a little smaller. Yeah. So let's just change this color up a little bit. Okay. So now you can see that's it's up top right there. So if you want to bring it down a little bit, you can add some padding or you can add a margin up top. So let's say we're going to add the padding as 100 pixels. Yep, so it comes down here. Cool. So like the previous website, let's see if we can make it a little bit more like we can add a button up here. Let's just add a title too. Let's say so now let's say we're going to add a button that helps you contact this person. So if you wanted, like, there's a different types of buttons here in BootStrap. So the most common buttons here are the primary buttons and the secondary buttons. So these are different types of buttons that are usually used and that you can include. And in case you don't want to include the normal buttons and you want to add custom CSS, again, feel free to do that. So let's just add a primary button here. I can show you how you can customize it. So if you were to see as it is, it looks a little plain. So let's just change this. Add a contact me button. So again, let's change the CSS a little bit. Um, that a background color of maybe blue violet. Let's add a little padding. Okay. Oops. Yeah, that looks fine. It's a little too big. Add a 10-pixel margin around it. All right. Cool. So obviously this button doesn't do anything because we haven't assigned any kind of JavaScript function to it as of yet. So let's just see how the others work for now. So now this is the first container that we have that just contains the details of this person. So now let's add a second container. Okay. So as per the website that I just showed you, that container has different types of grids, which brings us to what exactly grid is. So we've done containers. Now let's talk about the Bootstrap grid system. So BootStrap grid system is actually really important. So it's best if you pay a little attention to this part because the grid system is like very commonly used and it's very greatly preferred. It's also used in materialized CSS. So it's better if you understand how this works. So basically a Bootstrap page is divided into 12 columns, or it's yeah, in any type of length of the page, it's divided into 12 columns. So let's say you want to add a picture that is 12 columns wide. You just have to include the class col-12. So you can tell Bootstrap that you want it to take the full span of the container. So let's say instead of a picture, if you're adding a table of some sort and you want it to have two different sections, you can add column 6, column 6. Or if you want it to be a little bit more responsive, if you want it to, if it has 4 columns and you want it to break it down into 2, that's also what's possible here by using these classes, column 3, column 1. So these 12 classes are divided into different breakpoints, and you can use them as and when you require to do so. So I'll show you an example of that. Okay. Cool. So let's say for the first website that I've used over here, I've included a column that's just has a skills description. Let me just show that website real quick. Yeah. So you can see that this is a 4 container here. So what it basically does is that this 12 column is divided into 4. And if I were to resize this, see, it starts stacking at a certain breakpoint. Otherwise, it's stacked into columns of 2. So this is what we're going to try and achieve with our website today. Cool. So let's make this a container fluid class too. And here, like we've said, we're trying to, okay, here we've used a class called row. So basically, row is a class that is used when you want to include all these columns into one row. Let me zoom in my screen a little bit more if it's not visible. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to make this as a row class, and that spans over the whole width of the screen. So make this container 2. And there's a row class here. So now let's add the first thing that we saw there. So here I've used an icon. You can use any icons that you want. I'll just use this to explain this better. So let's just say we're going to use a class that these classes right here. What this means is that in case of small screens, it's going to take up 12 columns. So that means it's going to be the full width of the page. And in case of medium screens, this div right here is going to take up 6 columns. And in case of large screens, it's going to take up 3 columns. So let me just show you how this looks as it is. So in case of large screens, it's going to take up 12. Small screens, it's going to, medium screens, it's going to take up 6. And, oh, sorry, 3, 6, and 12. So let's just add some text here. Now that's done. Let's add a custom class here. It's the first column. So let's make this background color as red just to show you how this would look like. Oh, let me just make this go live again. In case you don't have, please install the go live feature. So it'll be easy to see your website as it is. See, as you can see here, in case of large screens, this takes up only this part. So it's as if the screen were to be divided into 4 columns, and this only took up the first of those 4 columns. And if it came to smaller screens, it takes up half the width. Like I've specified here, it takes up half the width, that is 6 columns. So in case of small screens, it would take up the complete column. This is here because of the padding that we've given that we can alter later. But this is how it actually works like. So this is, if you have any doubts regarding this, please let me know. Because this is pretty important, the grid system. Okay. So I've used a few classes here that I'm just going to copy and paste because it would take too much time to type it over again. And if anybody of you wants this code, then I can share it on my GitHub or something, so you can go through and see how you can alter the same to fit your style. So as you can see here, there's 4 columns in case of large screens. And in case of medium screens, it would come down to 2 columns. So it starts stacking up. And in case of really small screens, it's a lot smaller. And the reason you don't see the icons that I've included previously is because in my previous file, I've imported these icons here, used font awesome. So you can also use the same. Again, it has to come after the Bootstrap CDN. Any type of links comes after the Bootstrap CDN, not before. Your website would not work otherwise. Cool. So now you can see that these icons are here. And this is why we use CSS, because if not, these icons just look a little odd right here. So let's try and align them. So I've used the class skills logo as a way to refer to these icons. So let's change this styling in our CSS file. So since we want them to be aligned to the center, using And let's keep the margin left and right as auto. So this basically is used to align the logo towards the center and doesn't sway them one way or the other. I'm going to use the width as 30%. So you'll see what this does. Okay, miss something? Oh, I haven't aligned the first container. So now this container is not properly aligned. So we will change that first. Again, you can use internal or external CSS or even inline CSS. I prefer external CSS because it's a lot easier to read. It's a lot easier to keep track of. So let's give this a little padding so it looks a little in place. Yeah, I think it's a little too aligned to this left. Okay, let's fix that soon. I know. Right, let's fix that soon. Okay, so now that we know that the grid works at least, so try to fix this later. And I'm only human. If I make any mistakes and you guys find out, please let me know. Okay, now let's make the third container. So the third container that we used was a carousel. So what exactly is a carousel is that it's a slideshow for cycling through elements. So this is a little bit more advanced feature that's used in websites, and you're free to include this in your project or your portfolio if need be. Also, this is the breakpoints that I was talking about when it came to the responsive breakpoints used in Bootstrap. So in case of Bootstrap 4, there's extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. So these are the class names that's used. For extra small, you don't need a class name. So depending on these pixels or this breakpoints is when these effects take place. And in case of Bootstrap 5, you do have an extra, extra large um, class that is about 1400 pixels. So you can explore that as well. So here, if you, like I said, there's a lot of components that you can include in your Bootstrap sessions. So you search for carousel right here. So you have different types of carousels that's used here. So you can have carousels that don't have a pagination down here, or you can use carousels that do. You can also have carousels that have some kind of text down here, and this is a carousel that is a crossfade. That means when it changes, you can see the animation that happens. Yeah. So again, whatever you want to use, the code is right here. All you need to do is copy and paste it and change it as per what you need. So I'll be using the carousel that I've already coded here. So this is my carousel here. So this is a lot of code. So please feel free to go through it when you have time. Since we're kind of in a time constraint right now, I can't go through everything, but the code remains the same, like most of these things are the same. So you can see here, we have a pretty beautiful carousel here. And again, these images are not mine. These are just stock images that I found on Pexels and Unsplash. So feel free to go through that in case you were planning to do something of the same sort. Okay, so let me just go through this code. Okay, so here we're using a container fluid class. So again, container fluid kind of restricts the contents. And here we're using carousel example indicators. This is basically for the indicators that you see down here. Again, completely optional. So these are all basically for the navigation and the data slide numbers and all. So these are the actual contents of the carousel. Each of them are nested inside their own divs. And here you have an image class. This is D block basically means as display block, and W100 is width 100. The SRC is I've included my images within this folder. We have an alt here. And since in my carousel, I'm adding a few details right here. So I've added the name of the heading of the heading of this, as well as the text here. And in case you're wondering what is lorem ipsum, it's basically some kind of placeholder text that I've used here because I don't want to type the whole thing out. So basically, these are used 4 times, and each of them called carousel item. And this is used to control the previous and the next pictures. Okay, so finally, in my original website, I did have a form at the bottom. Again, forms are like very widely used, so it is beneficial to know how to use it. So let's add a contact me form here. It's always good to have a little few comments here and there just so you know what you're going through. Please do not add first container, second container, but it's best to have a more specific comment just so your code looks a little bit more cleaner. So in case of the contact me forms, you already have a lot of like ready forms here on Bootstrap. So as you can see here, these forms already contain all of the details that you would usually include. So email IDs, passwords, radio boxes, check boxes, all of that. So you can just copy and paste the code from here, or you can type it manually. But all you need to know when it comes to Bootstrap or any type of CSS frameworks is the classes that are used and the various utilities that are used here. So in case of my example here, I've had a container that is basically just a simple form. Of course, these even though we have this form right here, it doesn't, the submit button doesn't do anything. Since I know you guys might not be so familiar with JavaScript as of yet, as that session hasn't been conducted yet, but once you learn JavaScript, you'll know how to provide a function for your button or for any type of link that performs a certain task when you click on it. So now this website looks okay, but it still has a long way to go. But most of these things work. So the one thing we have to add is to make sure that these buttons work and these links are transferred to these components here. I think a few people have asked in the text box if Bootstrap is the only CSS frameworks used. It's not. There's a lot of CSS frameworks, as I aforementioned. There's Foundation, there's Materialize. Again, it comes down to your preferences and what you're comfortable with using. But learning Bootstrap is a good thing. Like I gave an example, if you're like if you're participating in a hackathon or something, it's really easy to come up with something that looks good in a certain amount of time and that looks a little professional instead of coding it from scratch. It's a good skill to have, but you shouldn't completely depend on Bootstrap in case you're becoming trying to become a full stack developer or some kind of a web based developer. So, but it's still a good skill to have. Okay. So you can see it looks a little, yeah, we were gonna add the IDs here. So the way this we want these things to work, like as I click on skills, I want it to go to this container or so on and so forth. So when I go up here, you can see in this I've added the experience and everything. So in this container is going to be my about container. So I'm going to add about as an ID. So the second container here is the container that contains all my so and so skills. So this will be my skills. And this contains my experience. And this is basically a contact form. So I will add the contact form. And if you're wondering where I'm getting these ID names from, I've used them in here, the href as to the links and used in the collapsible menu. So depending on what you name them is what you have to navigate them to. So if I were to click on experience, it would lead me to this carousel. If I would click on contact me, oh, that we haven't done, I guess. About goes to this container and skills works fine. Let's finish the form one, contact form. Oh, I've used contact me instead. Whoops. That's just me. Contact me itself. So now this should work. Yeah, it works fine. So I know this site that we tried building right now looks a little different from the one we've used before, and that's because of the CSS that I've used. Clearly, the CSS in this is a little more than the CSS used here. So feel free to experiment with Bootstrap and see which components works for you. These are only the basic components that I've covered today. There's a lot of components like a Jumbotron, a carousel, a button group, cards, and alerts, a lot of components as well as utilities. So make sure you explore this and you can ask any questions that you have on either this live chat happening right now or on the Discord channel. I'll try to answer your queries to the best of my abilities. And yeah, about the project tree that you have, I think you've already forked the repository and you've added your first and your second project. Your project tree will basically mean that you have to add Bootstrap to make your project look a little bit more professional. So that means you can add any components that you want and you can completely replace your CSS with Bootstrap, or you can have both of them at the same time. But it needs to look a little bit more professional. It needs to look a little bit more modernistic. You guys can go to awards.com. Let me show you. Here, if you go here and type in awards bootstrap, you'll see a lot of templates that were built based on Bootstrap. So make sure you can use this site for like inspiration for your websites. Also, Bootstrap itself has themes. So Bootstrap themes will also give you a lot of themes that you can use for inspiration. And you can basically design your portfolio to look a little bit more better. And since a portfolio is like incredibly important, regardless of whether you're thinking of a career in web dev or not, so it would be nice to get a head start and try to go through all this. And again, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't have to look a certain way, but it would be nice if it looks a little better, and you can make it a little bit more visually pleasing. Okay, so that's all I had to say. Let me just show that site one more time, just so I can show you what I was aiming to do. Yeah, this is what basically the site should look like. I'm not saying this is exactly what it should look like. This looks like a very minimalistic based portfolio. You can also try and make something that looks like this, or you can come up with something completely different. It's completely up to you guys, and I think you have time till January 25th for this website, for these projects. So feel free to take your time and see what works for you. So yeah, you could add a header, a footer. You can add menus. You can add maybe even animations if you're good enough. If you can find out. Also, there's a website called CodePen. If you haven't heard of it yet, the CodePen is basically a website where you can use to find more inspiration in case you wanted to. I'll include these links in the Discord channel in case anyone was interested. So these also have inspirations on how you can use Bootstrap to make a little bit more better website. It also has a lot of examples and themes that you can go through with. So yeah, that was the session for today. And I hope you guys had a good time. And if you learned something or if you already knew Bootstrap, I hope you were able to brush up your skills. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Sanjana, for an amazing session. Now
Thank you.
let's answer some questions. So the first one says, "It is it good to only have Bootstrap or a mix of Bootstrap and CSS?"
It is definitely beneficial to know CSS since Bootstrap is basically like a template that you use, but you have to know CSS to even understand Bootstrap in the first place. But it's always good to know both. And yeah, so yeah, both is good.
Yeah. So Bootstrap is useful in future or not, or like is it there another framework in CSS which one should use more?
Bootstrap is the most popular framework, but it isn't the only one. There's a lot of frameworks, like I've said, there's Materialize, there's Foundation, there's a lot of frameworks that you can explore, but it's definitely beneficial to know Bootstrap. Like if you were participating in something like a hackathon, or if you're trying to come up with some kind of a prototype that needs to look professional, but you don't want to start from scratch, definitely beneficial to know Bootstrap.
I guess there were only these much question. Also, if anyone left any questions, then you can ask them through Sanjana. She's already there in our Discord server, and she'll be linking all the links which she has used in the server itself. I hope everyone enjoys their day, and best of luck with your Bootstrap projects.
Yeah. Thank you, Harsh. Thank you, everyone, for listening in.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Sanjana, for an informative session.
Thank you. Thank you.